So, on this episode, we're going to be talking about what's next for Arkansas after their crushing loss to Georgia. Cincinnati pulls off the win against Notre Dame. Will they be able to make the playoffs? And lastly, how good is this Michigan Wolverines football team after defeating Wisconsin? Now, Georgia demolished and manhandled Arkansas 37-0. And it really breaks my heart to have to say it that way, but that's pretty much what happened. And I was extremely surprised that Georgia dominated Arkansas the way they did. And I'm not saying that I'm surprised because I thought Georgia was a flawed football team, because there were a lot of people coming in saying that Georgia hasn't played anybody, they're overrated. And here's my thing, okay, I knew Georgia was a good team. I didn't need Georgia to face top 25 opponents to realize that this was one of the best teams in America. I understood that. However, I thought that Arkansas was going to be able to handle themselves up front and not get manhandled in the way that they did, and I was entirely wrong about that. Now, I still picked Georgia to get the win. I still had them winning by at least 10, but I didn't think they would blow out Arkansas the way they did. I mean, this was a splattering. And like I said, it hurts my soul to say this because, I've been rooting for Arkansas this season, even before this year began. And when you look at this Arkansas game, man, I mean, Georgia didn't even have to throw the football to move the ball down the field. They had 273 rushing yards. James Cook, 87 rushing yards, 7.3 yards per carry. Zamir White, 68 rushing yards, 4.3 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. Kenny McIntosh, 57 rushing yards, 5.7 yards per attempt. Kendall Milton, 4 yards per carry, a touchdown, and 48 rushing yards. Like, Arkansas was getting gashed in the run game. Like, Georgia manhandled Arkansas up front on both sides of the football. I can't remember the last time I remember Arkansas having less than 100 rushing yards in a game this year. Like, this was an absolute smackdown, and I was really surprised that it happened the way that it did. I'm not surprised that Georgia got the win. I'm surprised in the fashion that Georgia got the win. On top of that, they did this with Stetson Bennett. He only threw the ball 11 times this game. So, what's next for Arkansas after their first loss of the season? Well, me personally, if you're an Arkansas fan, you still have a lot of football to go. You play Ole Miss this weekend. An Ole Miss team that, like you, also got dominated by one of the best teams in college football, which is Alabama. So both Arkansas and Ole Miss are coming off pretty devastating losses, even though Ole Miss was able to put some points up in the end. But pretty much Ole Miss got dominated in the same fashion that Arkansas got dominated. So you have two teams coming off their first losses of the year. If you're an Arkansas fan, you definitely like the matchup against Ole Miss, because Arkansas, how they got the ball ran down their throats by Georgia, Ole Miss got the ball ran down their throats by Alabama in pretty similar fashion. And there was nothing that Ole Miss defense could do to stop that Alabama offense. If you're Arkansas, you feel pretty good about your chances of being able to beat Ole Miss, because you do still have a really good defense. Despite what happened against Georgia, Ole Miss is not that dominant up front like Georgia is. And to be fair with you, that is the best defensive line that Arkansas is probably going to face this whole entire season, probably until they face Alabama. And that's probably the best offensive line that Arkansas is going to face this year. Arkansas just was a inferior team to Georgia. Georgia and Alabama are two of the best teams in college football. So if you're a Razorback fan, you should definitely be feeling really confident about your team going into this game against Ole Miss, because we know that Ole Miss can put up points, but we don't know if Ole Miss can get stops on defense. And you look at how good Arkansas is in the trenches, I definitely like their chances against Ole Miss. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to beat Ole Miss, but I'm saying that you definitely have to like their chances. Now, how healthy is quarterback for Arkansas, KJ Jefferson? Because KJ Jefferson, he was, having some injury problems heading into that Georgia matchup. So you have to wonder, how is he feeling this week? How is he going to feel, and how healthy is he going to be going into that Ole Miss game? And also another thing that I want to see is I want to see how this Arkansas team bounces back, okay? Because normally when you get beat down by a team like Georgia, it kind of hits you mentally. And that's something that I'm always eager to see in a turnaround game when you're in a situation like Ole Miss and Arkansas. Are you going to let Georgia or Alabama beat you 2 weeks in a row? Because there's more than just beating a team on the field. You can also beat a team mentally. So if you're an Arkansas Razorback fan, you have to wonder, how resilient this team going to be? Are they just going to be able to come out here and be defeated? Or are they going to bounce back and get back to what they were prior to playing Georgia? Now, that Georgia game was really tough, man. And like I mentioned earlier, I was really surprised that Arkansas got dominated up front by the way they did by Georgia. Georgia has some freaks. Who's that dude, number 99 on defense? Bro, this dude is a cheat code. This dude is a glitch. I've never seen a defensive tackle be able to set the edge, move sideline to sideline the way number 99 was. What's his name? Jordan Davis, I believe it is. Bro, this dude is a freaking freak. That dude is big as hell, and this dude was going all the way to the edge, getting these running backs for Arkansas down, bringing down KJ Jefferson. Like, this dude was a freak. Like, Georgia's defensive line is not your typical great defensive line. Like, there are a lot of athletic freaks on that defensive line. So if you're an Arkansas Razorback fan, you're not going to end up seeing many defensive lines like this ever. Like, that Georgia defensive line is absolutely nasty, but I thought that Arkansas would be able to handle their own up front, and they weren't. And another big reason why Arkansas lost this game was because they didn't really have all that great field position. Like, a lot of their drives were really in the back of their own territory. So their average starting field position wasn't even all that great. So for Arkansas, man, you got outgained 345 total yards to 162. You only had 75 rushing yards, 87 passing yards. You couldn't really get much going. And then when you were able to get a nice little drive going, you weren't able to hit the field goals. So for Arkansas, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong against Georgia. And when you're playing a team like Georgia, you don't have the opportunity to have too many mistakes. You don't have the opportunity to have missed field goals, and that's what happened to Arkansas. I'm still really high on Arkansas. I still feel like this is the second best team in the SEC West, and I definitely like their chances against Ole Miss. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be Ole Miss, because Ole Miss also could exploit that Arkansas defense. Like I've been telling people, that 3-3-5 defense, when you're only rushing 3, it kind of leaves you at a disadvantage, because then if the 3 guys that you're sending pressure with aren't able to get pressure on the QB, that's going to be a problem. So you're probably going to have to throw in some blitzes there. And also, you definitely have to make sure that your linebackers are able to set the edge. And for Arkansas, they weren't able to do that against Georgia. So you look at Ole Miss this week. Ole Miss offensive line is solid, but it's not as good as Georgia. You definitely can look at that defensive line for Arkansas, and they probably could have a bounce back game. Now, also on top of that, you have an Ole Miss team that got gashed by Alabama in the run game. If you're Arkansas, what are you really good at? You're running the football with KJ Jefferson, running the football with the talented group of running backs that you have on the roster, like Raheem Saunders and whatnot. So I definitely feel really high on this Arkansas team. A lot of people have been asking me, JT, you overrated Arkansas. I didn't overrate Arkansas. Like, I was just really high on Arkansas. I mean, they beat Texas. They beat Texas A&M. They're 2-1 against ranked opponents. I mean, what more do you want? Like, it was bound to happen. They were bound to lose a game. People act like I said they were going to go undefeated. You know, it was bound to happen. I picked Georgia to get the win. I just thought that the game would be a little bit more competitive. But, you know, When you're facing one of the best teams in college football, one of the two best teams in college football, I should add, sometimes the talent gap is just too big, and that's what we saw. Georgia was just a more talented football team than Arkansas, but I can guarantee you we would not see Arkansas get dominated the way they did up front for the remainder of the season. I can put money on that.